Hello and welcome. My name is Danielle Lyn Viola, and I am an awakening and ascension guide, and it is my great honor and pleasure to serve you in becoming your greatest version. And today we're going to talk about emotional stability, the number one must-have practice that will support your cultivating emotional stability in your life. So first and foremost, I just want to do a little disclaimer and let you know that I am not a clinical therapist or psychologist. I am rather a spiritual guide. I am a mentor, a coach, and a teacher. And the information that I'm bringing forth here comes from 8 years of experience in serving and supporting, first and foremost, myself in attaining emotional stability, but also hundreds upon hundreds of clients and students that were able to create and cultivate transformation in the life by embodying emotional stability. So first, I'd like to just give you a little lineup of what we're going to be talking about today. First, we're going to be talking about emotional stability and what it is. Then we're going to get into some prerequisite practices to keep in your consciousness that are going to support you in being able to maintain this number one practice in your life that is going to cultivate emotional stability for you. Okay, so what does it mean to be emotionally stable? So there's a lot that I could say about this. So I'm going to bring it down to a simple analogy, and that's one of a ship. And you are the captain of this ship. When we are emotionally stable, say, for example, you're on the ship and you're captaining your ship, and there is bad weather coming, or say one of your shipmates does something on the ship that is upsetting or bothersome to the health and safety of the ship. Say, for example, I don't know, a rudder goes, or one of the windbreaker breaks, or something of that nature. When you have emotional stability, you're still able to be the captain at the helm of your ship. You're still mentally, emotionally, and physically available to captain that ship. In other words, you're still in your center, because you need to be in your center in order to effectively captain and navigate a ship. When you are not, in that case, emotionally stable, what would happen is, say, bad weather comes, or again, somebody on the ship does something that is worrisome, bothersome, upsetting, frustrating, so on and so forth. You would not be captaining your ship. In essence, you would probably leave the helm and you would run over to the person, or you would be running off trying to, fix something or change something or force something to be different, right? This is an example of when we are out of our center, when we're not emotionally stable, but rather we're subject to the wind and the weather, so to speak, and we're taken out of center, right? We're taken out of our power, out of our grounding, and our attention, focus, and energy then is going towards something else other than captaining the ship. Okay, so when we are emotionally stable in the world, for example, things can happen. Sure, they're upsetting, bothersome, frustrating, but we're not taken away from the helm of our ship. We're still at the helm. We're still centered and grounded. And predominantly, the bulk of our life force energy is going towards captaining our ship, right? Captaining our life in a constructive way. So this is what it means to be emotionally stable. It's where anything can happen around you. And sure, maybe for a moment, your attention, your energy might be off kilter or to the side, but you're able to bring yourself right back into center, nice and grounded as the captain of your ship. Okay, so before we get into the number one must-have, a foundational practice to cultivating emotional stability, let's talk about a couple of prerequisites. So in order to work with the number one foundational practice for emotional stability, you first have to know two things, or have awareness of two things. And number one is to know your center. So what do I mean by knowing your center? Knowing your center is the practice of having and building awareness around when you are calm, when you are centered and focused within your life, when you are fully embodied, meaning that all of your energy is within the body and working for you constructively. When you're in your center, you are in a place of groundedness. Typically, it's a calm, content feeling. It's a feeling where nothing is pulling you either into the future or pulling you into the past, right? When you're completely in your center, there's a sense of stillness within you, right? There is a familiarity with what that feels like to be in a calm, centered, somewhat, focused sense of being that allows you to be fully available for everything that's happening around you in the world, right? It's where you're not distracted, right? How many times we're walking down the street, and even though we're walking down the street and it seems like we're just, focused in there, but in actuality, what we're doing is we're thinking about what happened yesterday at a party that we were at, or we're thinking about, later on, we're going to see somebody and we're nervous about the conversation, right? That's not being in your center. Being in your center is you're fully present, fully available, in a somewhat calm state, right? Because you're just fully there, fully available and aware. You have a heightened level of awareness around where you are, what you're doing, right? In any given moment of time. Okay, so that first prerequisite is knowing your center, having familiarity with what that feels like. Meditation can help you with that, as well as practicing hara, which I have a video on mastering hara if you want to learn more about that. It's a phenomenal practice that will really help you to cultivate and ground centeredness and what that feels like for you. So that leads us to the second thing to keep in your conscious awareness when you are practicing this number one must-have foundational practice for emotional stability is when you have awareness of what your center is like and what it feels like, then you have also then the heightened awareness when you're out of center, right? Many times we don't have awareness around being out of center because 80+% of the time we're out of center, right? We're not present. We're not consciously aware of what we're doing, what we're thinking, what we're feeling at any given moment for the most part, right? We've been conditioned that way in society and especially in our culture here, in America, very much distracted, right? Always out of center, right? So the practice then is to first be aware of what the center feels like for you. And that will help you to then build a sensitivity of awareness of when you're out of center. So these are the two things that are going to help and support you in cultivating that number one must-have practice for emotional stability. Okay, so now that you have awareness of when you're in your center and when you're out of your center, you can now begin to build this number one must-have foundational practice for emotional awareness. And that is know thyself. Knowing thyself, meaning knowing yourself, helps you to cultivate emotional stability. And again, I'm going to bring it to an analogy of an ocean. When you don't know yourself, you're at the very top of the ocean where the waves are. And life will bring you all sorts of waves and titles and all sorts of things that happen that are going to rock you all over the place. And because you don't know yourself, you're constantly scrambling and trying to create some sort of stability to keep yourself safe while the waves are rocking and rolling. Okay. But when you do know thyself, right? When you know yourself well enough to know what bothers you, what triggers you, what you want, what you don't want. When you know thyself, you know what your boundaries are, what you allow in, what you don't allow in. When you know thyself, you have awareness around what your strengths are or what your weaknesses are, right? The more that you know yourself, the deeper you go into yourself. Like the ocean, instead of being on the top with the waves, you're actually deeper underneath in the undercurrent, where there's not so much topsy-turvy, tumultuous activity, but rather there's more of a strength and stability in the undercurrent, more of a stillness. When you know thyself, then you can go out into the world and you can have experiences, sure, where people do things that might annoy you, bother you, or upset you, which is otherwise known as triggers. But you're not so taken out of center where, say, you're consumed for half hour, a day, a week, a month, a year, consumed around how that could have happened or why that happened to me, right? Or you're consumed and with your energy and your consciousness around what you should have said, what should have happened, or how dare they, or how reactive you are to whatever that experience was. The triggers are the events that happen, right? Like not so much the events, but it's your reaction to those events that are triggers. And if you want to learn and understand more about triggers, I have a video as well that is all about triggers, learning to heal and to integrate parts of yourself through working with your triggers. You know, we each have individualized triggers, and I don't want to get into it too much here in this video. I want to keep it around that number one must-have foundational practice of knowing thyself. But triggers are a great way. It's like a little pro tip here. It's a great way of working with knowing thyself, because you start to understand that your reactions are unique to you, right? It's that you could have 100 people on the street all having the same experience at the same time, you know, with some event, say it's a car accident or something, and each person will react differently in that situation or scenario, right? You know, one person might be looking at it like, oh, you know, that poor woman, and feeling all emotionally triggered by it. Another person might just, you know, send love to the situation. Another person might be angry and be in a blame state of reaction, right? Each of our reactions are our own. And working with triggers really helps you to deepen the practice of knowing thyself. So when you take this core foundational practice of knowing thyself and you make it a lifestyle, and you start to approach the world from a place rather than of victimhood or blame, or a place of feeling powerless, or a place of feeling like you can't, or not enoughness, or just a feeling that you're subject to things that you'd rather not be subject to, and that they are negatively impacting you in your life. If you instead turn that around and keep that overarching conscious awareness of knowing thyself and working with your triggers and understanding where your center is, in time, you will come to know yourself on a much deeper level, like that undercurrent, much more stable, much more flowing, and much more enjoyable. I hope you like this video. I'd love to hear from you of what works for you with your emotional stability practices. And if anything in this video you found helpful or that you have a comment for, please comment, like, and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video. Much love to you. Bye-bye.